Yo, it is Mr. Beat. It's Monday morning, 9 a.m. Central. We do this every Monday. Thanks for being here. I'm still not in my new studio. I don't know if I'm going to be there next Monday, but that was originally the plan. So hopefully I will be. But I'm just in a random room. I don't even know whose house this is. That's where I'm at right now. We're talking impeachment today. Hey there, Evil Dog 667. Yeah, it's Mr. Breast here. Wake up, wake up. Hello, hello. Master Beats. Yeah, that's don't say it. Don't get me out of context on that. ZJ13 Goat 69. Every time I say your username, I just crack up. It's great. Oopie Soup's here. Good to see you. Whoa, you're from Romania? And you're the first human? That's amazing. Thanks for being here. Got my royal shirt, which means I'm in I don't know what that means. They've lost over 100 games this year, so congratulations to the Kansas City Royals for losing more than 100 games. Yeah, I think this is my house. Yeah. Yeah, it's well, this is actually the Mrs. Beats office in our new house we just got. And we moved in, but the new studio is not finished yet, so we're just kind of waiting. Oh, from the Philippines. Bolivia! Holy crap! Thanks for being here. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Good morning. I don't know what that means, but all right. So if you're new here, welcome. I do this every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Central, and this week we're going to watch a couple videos. I usually just react to history videos, typically American political history, but sometimes geography, economics. This past week, it's been in the news that President Joe Biden will possibly be impeached. I don't think it's going to happen. However, the charges against him are pretty serious. And if they can provide evidence, which I have yet to see, I've seen lots of articles describing the evidence, but if that evidence actually exists, they actually present the hard evidence, whether it be recordings, whether it be photographs, emails, actual emails, not descriptions of emails. Testimonies are fine, eyewitness testimonies, but they're not as solid. Frankly, they're not going to be. They don't carry as much weight. But if that evidence is good enough, if you don't know what's going on right now, members of the House. The House of Representatives and the Judiciary Committee are considering evidence to charge Joe Biden with bribery, which goes against the Constitution. So that would be an impeachment. Remember, impeachment doesn't mean to charge. That means or to convict. It just means to formally charge. You're looking into it, and then the Senate would have a trial. So yeah, we're going to go over all that again, but just so you know that this is just an inquiry. So we're not even to an impeachment. Like I said, I don't think an impeachment's actually going to happen. I don't think they have the evidence, frankly, because if they did, we would have seen it by now. Like with Trump, they had the evidence presented beforehand, and even then, like it was solid evidence for the first impeachment of Trump, but it was still kind of like, okay, you can interpret this in different ways. So maybe he's going to get away with this. Plus, it was hyper partisan, and it still is, by the way. I believe that a lot of this talk about impeaching Biden is heavily political as payback for what Democrats, did to Trump when he was in office. Plus, what Trump's going through now with his, what was it, like 80 some charges, the 4 indictments, 80 some 90 some I don't even know how many charges are against Trump, but he's in some trouble, it looks like. So anyway, yeah, the second Trump impeachment was much more solid in my opinion. The first one was like with Russia and Ukraine, but the second one was like, okay, did he incite violence on January 6th? We have the video evidence of it. I mean, you could interpret that different ways too, though. 91. That's the magic number. 91 felony charges, 4 jurisdictions, 4 indictments. He may even get indicted a 5th time, rumors are saying. But he'll be in court for many years. Beginning this in March, it's going to start happening for the first trial. So yeah, we're gonna react to 2 videos that first came out. I find this interesting because these 2 videos came out when Trump was first impeached. So in case you forgot about the first impeachment of Donald Trump, it seems so long ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. And now it kind of seems like a nothing burger. But the first impeachment of Donald Trump happened at the end of 2019. Remember, the Democratic Party had a majority in the House of Representatives. He was later acquitted by the Senate just a couple months later. But the charges, the 2 articles of impeachment against Trump were abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. And this is related to him. The allegations were that he withheld military aid to Ukraine in order to get Ukraine to investigate, you guessed it, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's. And so currently what's happening actually is related to that. Like the charges against Joe Biden are that he specifically, with his son, Hunter Biden, were essentially selling political favors, extortion. They were, it's kind of what I described in my recent corporate welfare video. You have somebody in power in politics, in government, who they can make it so that laws bend or even change in the favor of a private entity, usually a corporation, but sometimes just, an organization or group of people. And in exchange, the person in government gets some money. They get kickbacks. They get, whether it be now or later, usually later. And it's a fairly common thing. Corruption is fairly legal, actually, in the United States because there's no explicit laws that say members of government can't be financially involved with stuff that's related to what they're making laws about or interpreting laws about in the case of judges. So yeah, it's it's crazy that it is legal. There have been talks for a long time for it to be illegal, like a law to be passed in Congress to make it illegal for members of Congress to buy or sell stocks related to what the laws they make, because this has been a problem for a long time. But anyway, when it comes to the president, yeah, their argument is from some in the Republican Party is that if this is true, then that's going against what the president legally is able to do based on impeachable offenses. And if you remember, impeachable offenses it's really just 3 things: bribery, fraud, or bribery, treason, and quote, high crimes or misdemeanors, which could be interpreted 1,000 different ways. Let's get into the video here. I'll check the chat though. I'll try to check in with this. Yeah, you don't think there's any merit to it? I think direct democracy is a good thing generally when it comes to local issues, like in terms of city, county, even in some cases state elections. I think there should be more direct democracy. He technically can. There's nothing in the Constitution that forbids him from running. Hey, what's up? All right. Oh gosh, that would take a long time for me to explain. Maybe I'll make a video about it, but if I get into it now, like, I recommend reading Amity Shales. She's a historian who kind of lays out all the problems with the New Deal. As long as we're in these hyper-partisan times, it could very well be. So, all right. So let's. The first video came out in 2019, and it's called "How Do You Impeach a President?" And the channel is Now This. I've never reacted to Now This. Now This, in my opinion, often oversimplifies. They have a very left-leaning bent, so they're very biased towards, especially the Democratic Party. But they released this video before Trump was even in office, and then the next video we're going to release, we're going to watch, was released right before Trump was impeached, or around the time Trump was impeached. And remember, I released my own impeachment video. What was this, last spring, a few months ago? So, check it out if you haven't already. But all right, here we go.
On January 7th, 1999, the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton began. It was the third time in the history of the United States that a president was a part of impeachment proceedings. But besides the potential to be removed from the presidency, many people then and now are confused as to the actual meaning of the term. With calls to impeach President Obama coming from conservatives for the entirety of his 2 terms, we thought we'd take a look at what it means to impeach a president. What exactly is impeachment? Well, off the bat, it may sound like...
Yeah, that's probably something I should go over here, is that, yes, there have only been 3 presidents that have been impeached. Not Nixon. Nixon was not, he was never impeached. So Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump. That's it. However, in terms of like talks of impeachment, a lot more. There's the first category, which is basically just like people threatening to impeach, which has happened quite a bit. That would be, so if you go throughout history, like there were people, almost every president really. But in recent years, Obama, a lot of people talked about it. Nothing ever came out of it. And then actually there were, the next category would be, okay, we're going to kind of start the process. There are impeachment resolutions that we introduce. And so if in that category, we have Ulysses Grant, Grover Cleveland, Herbert Hoover, Harry Truman, Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., and then currently Joe Biden. And then there's the next category, which is a step up from that, where it's like, okay, we have a formal investigation that has been taking place, but they're still not impeached. And that's James Buchanan. And you could say maybe Richard Nixon too. But I mean, Nixon would have been impeached, no doubt, if he did not resign. But the reason why he wasn't impeached was because he resigned. But yeah, that just because, I mean, even Thomas Jefferson even was, there was an impeachment inquiry against him. He was the very first one. And then John Tyler also is the other one, in terms of there were actually official impeachment inquiries into, and as for what they did, I mean, if you look at almost all of these, almost all of them were political. Like the offenses were kind of like, okay, all right. So just keep that in mind. This is nothing new. And frankly, I think what's going on right now with Joe Biden is probably going to be forgotten in history, ultimately.
Like impeaching a president means removing him from office. But in fact, that is only the end result of the impeachment process.
Right.
Impeachment is simply the process by which legal charges are pressed against a non-military member of the government. This is effectively a high-level indictment and is the first step on an impeachment trial. According to Article 2 of the...
Yeah, their definition is a little weird. They say non-military member of the government. That's probably an interesting one, because if they're in the military, then there's a whole different system. But yeah, just charging someone in public office of wrongdoing is maybe a better, simpler way to define it.
According to Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, all civil officers, including the president and vice president, shall be removed from office if they are impeached and the trial finds them guilty. The Constitution lists treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Furthermore, only the House of Representatives is allowed to bring impeachment charges, which is followed by a trial in the Senate. The first president to face impeachment was Andrew Johnson in 1868. Johnson had taken over the presidency after Lincoln was assassinated.
Well, the first president to face impeachment was Thomas Jefferson, really. But yeah, in terms of actually being impeached, it was Johnson.
Congress passed the Tenure of Office Act, which prevented the president from removing a member of his cabinet without Senate approval. Believing the act was unconstitutional, Johnson relieved his Secretary of War and replaced him with Ulysses S. Grant. 3 days later, the House voted 126 to 47 to go ahead and impeach the president for 11 high crimes and misdemeanors, primarily focused on violation of the act. But in order for a president to actually be removed from office, the Constitution requires that at least 2/3 of the Senate vote to convict. Johnson's presidency was saved by a single vote, and he ultimately stayed in office. The second ever attempted impeachment was in July 1974 against President Richard Nixon. Nixon tried to cover up a break-in at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in a scandal known as Watergate. Nixon and his team refused to allow in-depth investigations.
Yeah, I got a whole video about Watergate as well, too. Check it out if you want.
The president soon saw himself facing a number of allegations, including tax fraud. Many, likely including Nixon, saw that if the House voted for his impeachment, then he would certainly end up being convicted. So just after the House Judiciary Committee approved his impeachment, but before it was voted on by the House of Representatives, President Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974. Similarly to President Johnson, President Clinton was ultimately impeached but not found guilty. The trial became widely known for Clinton's evasive and untruthful statements, such as, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman," and questioning the definition of the word "is." In the end, no president has ever been removed from office after being impeached. And really, impeachment isn't the worst thing that can happen. During the crafting of the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin said that most unpopular heads of state are removed from office by being assassinated, and that perhaps there should be a procedural method of removal instead. So there you have it, impeachment. Regardless of how many conservatives asked for Obama to be impeached,
Yeah, so I forgot actually about all the people that were talking about impeachment for Obama. I don't even remember why. I guess you could. I mean, there were legitimate things he could have been impeached for, like his, I would say, killing American citizens on foreign lands, civilian citizens, non-combatants. Just look that up. It's pretty messed up. I mean, he put whistleblowers in prison. So that's maybe something that would have been I don't know. I don't remember what he was impeached for or what they tried to impeach him for. But nothing formal ever came of that. So this is interesting that this video came out January 2016. So this is little did I know what was going to happen over the next few years. I saw somebody comment on here. Let's see. Yeah. Reagan, the reason why they were wanting to impeach him was definitely related to Iran-Contra. I have a video about the Iran-Contra affair as well. Check it out. The tan suit is obviously the most impeachable offense. There we go. Reference to Stranger Than Fiction. I love it. Whoa, look at your. Oh, is that? How about that profile pic, huh? Yeah, that's something I maybe should make a short about. I looked into this, and it does appear that the Secret Service, I mean, they are obligated to go wherever the president goes. And so if a former president does go to prison, I think at least one member of the Secret Service should also be there. Now, what would be their accommodations? I assume it would be much better than a prison cell. But yeah, there would definitely be somebody still assigned. That's my understanding. Pretty interesting. Yeah, kind of feel bad for those. Okay, so the next video is, like I said earlier, this is by Vox, another left-leaning outlet. But this one came out right. Oh no, I guess this was before. This was when Trump was president, but it was a couple of years before he was actually impeached. So I never saw both of these. Never came across them.
Founding fathers were debating how to set up a brand new government, they ran into a problem. What should happen if a president, in Benjamin Franklin's words, has rendered himself obnoxious? Most countries didn't have elected leaders or ways to get
That seems like something Benjamin Franklin would say. Yeah.
rid of them. So Franklin and the framers turned to a provision of British common law known as impeachment. Trial, conviction, punishment.
In Great Britain, impeachment could be brought against anybody, any citizen. And it also could result in any punishment, including death.
Michael Gerhardt
wow, I didn't know that. Impeachment. So in Great Britain, you could be impeached. Anybody could be impeached, and the punishment could be up to death. That's crazy.
is a constitutional law professor who literally wrote the book on impeachment.
And so they put impeachment into the Constitution and then set up a whole series of unique American features in it.
The Constitution lays out 3 offenses for which any federal official, including the president, can be impeached. The first 2, treason and bribery, are pretty straightforward. Treason means...
Is that what I said earlier? I think I said that, right? Treason, bribery, and then high crimes or misdemeanors is the third one, yeah.
It's helping enemies of the United States, and bribery is taking money or gifts in exchange for a political favor.
And the last phrase, high crimes and misdemeanors, is hard to define. Obviously, it's not defined in the Constitution, but these were thought to be serious offenses against the Republic and serious breaches of trust.
For 3 U.S. presidents, Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton, the question of whether to impeach and remove them from office centered around whether their behavior fit into this third category of high crimes and misdemeanors. The impeachment process has to start in the House of Representatives. Any member can introduce an impeachment resolution.
A resolution, articles of impeachment of George Bush, President of the United States. Resolved.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember watching that live, actually, in 2008. And back then, people called Dennis Kucinich crazy. He was trying to impeach George W. Bush for... It's related to the shenanigans with the Iraq War, is what I remember. Of course, nothing became out of it. Everybody laughed at him. And then, it's funny, and then jump ahead a few years, 12, 13 years, and then we have another member of the House of Representatives, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is probably the most infamous in the House currently. That was one of the first things she did. She introduced a resolution for impeachment against Biden. This was in 2021, I think. And obviously nothing came out of it. I think she did it multiple times, but it was pretty clear that it was just I'm going to get him, even though she probably knew that no one would join her and nothing would come out of it. But what happened since 2021? Midterm elections, 2022, and the Republicans have a slim majority currently in the House. And so that's why I think Kevin McCarthy, and again, I think this is mostly political, but he's like, okay, let's at least look into this, It's kind of it's almost like just ammunition to feed Republicans, as they seek re-election next year. It seems to be just like this political game that's just always going back and forth. And it's been that way. Like I said, it's been that way pretty much throughout all of the history. I mean, Thomas Jefferson was impeached by Federalists mostly. It was mostly the Federalist Party that hated Thomas Jefferson, and they were just doing whatever they could to get him. Same thing, Andrew Johnson, who was impeached. You have Congress led by the radical Republicans that created a law, the Tenure of Office Act, with the primary reason why they created that law was to get Andrew Johnson out of office. So this is almost always a political game that they play. So I would be surprised in my lifetime if I were to actually see a president convicted and kicked out of office because of an impeachment. And Andrew Johnson, it was just one vote that saved him. I don't know if that's a pretty crazy thing, but I just don't see, if Joe Biden gets impeached, a big if, because I think there are several Republicans that would probably be like, I think about the Republicans that are more moderate, that have competitive districts, which is at least probably a fourth of them. They may not want to vote to impeach Biden, especially if the evidence is kind of not really there. And so, this could be, if he does get impeached, let's say, you've got a Democratic Senate. So nothing's going to happen with this. It just appears to be posturing. And a lot of times when you have these resolutions that are introduced, same thing. It's just like, they're just trying to get attention. They're just trying to rile up the base and try to score political points.
That President George W. Bush be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors.
But plenty like this one go nowhere.
Yep.
That's because impeachment charges have to be approved by a majority of the House Judiciary Committee. Next, the full House of Representatives votes on whether to impeach.
Well, it's usually the House Judiciary Committee. It could also be. Technically, it could be a different committee, but almost always it's the House Judiciary Committee, which, in my opinion, is the most powerful committee in the House. A majority of them has to recommend it. So you do have, who knows? And maybe the majority of them will not recommend it.
The simple majority votes yes, the president is officially impeached. But that doesn't necessarily mean they lose the presidency. That decision happens in a Senate trial. The senators are basically the jury. They hear evidence from both sides, and if 67 of those senators vote to convict, the president is removed from office. This has never actually happened. A House majority voted to impeach Andrew Johnson for firing his Secretary of War. This was after months of conflict after Reconstruction following the Civil War. The only other president impeached by the House was Bill Clinton in 1998. But in both of those cases...
Again, this is like the... wow, what simpler times.
Not enough senators voted to actually remove the president from office. Johnson was only one vote short, but in Clinton's case, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, it was a lot closer actually with Trump. And it is kind of mind-blowing to think about how, we are approaching, as a country, the United States, we are approaching our 250th birthday here in 2026. And in all those years, we've only had 3 presidents impeached. The third one was impeached twice, and it was within just a few, it was within like a year of each other. That's crazy to think about. I don't know. I don't think a lot of us realize the strange times. The Trump era is indeed something that's historic.
The respondent, William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the second article of impeachment.
That's because votes in Clinton's impeachment in the House and trial in the Senate were split almost completely by party.
And part of the disagreement within the Senate had to do with the context in which Clinton's actions had taken place.
The whole thing started when Clinton was sued for sexual harassment by a woman named Paula Jones, who had worked for him when he was governor of Arkansas. In a deposition for that case, Jones's lawyers asked Clinton if he'd had a sexual relationship with a different woman, a White House intern named Monica Lewinsky. Clinton said he hadn't.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Ms. Lewinsky.
But that wasn't true.
I had intimate contact with her that was inappropriate.
House will be in order.
Republicans in the House argued that Clinton should be impeached for lying under oath.
This is a public act, not a private act.
What the defenders want to do is lower the standards by which we hold this president.
You, sir, may resign your post.
Democrats disagreed that the offense was serious enough to be called a high crime. At one point, they walked out of the House chamber in protest.
There is one small segment on the far right
Schumer,
who have lost all objectivity and are determined to impeach the president at all costs.
House Resolution 611.
If I heard that quote by Schumer today, I would not be surprised, because that's probably exactly what he would say about what's currently going on against Biden.
Resolved that William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors.
But throughout this process, Clinton's popularity never really suffered.
Not a sense the American people are demanding that he be tossed.
Look at that approval rating. Look at that.
People are
high crimes and misdemeanors.
But
look at that approval rating. We just don't have that anymore. Biden and Trump are 20 points. They were consistently 20 points lower than that. It's kind of amazing. And this was less than 30 years ago, 25 years ago.
Throughout this process, Clinton's popularity never really suffered.
Not a sense the American people are demanding that he be tossed out of office.
Not a single Democratic senator voted to remove Clinton from office.
Typically, you'd need to have members of more than one party.
That's one of the major differences between Clinton's case.
And they were, at the second impeachment of Trump, there were a few Republicans that voted to impeach him, including Mitt Romney, who just announced recently that he's retiring, getting up there in age. So he's like, I'm stepping down. There were how many Republicans? 7? Let's see. No. There were 2 independents and 5 Republicans. Well, the 2 independents are left-leaning. 55 to 45 vote. So the second impeachment was incitement of insurrection charge. That was the only one article. And it was a very quick process. You know, it started January 26, 2021 and ended just 2.5 weeks later. They had to move along quickly because they wanted to get it over with now that, you know, there was a new president and they wanted to move on. But yeah, like that was, there's a little bit of bipartisanship there, but still mostly partisan for the second Trump impeachment.
And President Richard Nixon's. Over the course of several months in 1973, members of Congress and the American people learned about Nixon's possible involvement in a break-in at the offices of the Democratic National Committee.
The Democratic National Committee is located in the Watergate office building.
The 5 men carried cameras and apparently had planted electronic bugs.
The espionage operation on the president's behalf was called the Offensive Security Program. The charge that the president knowingly participated in the Watergate cover-up.
That evidence only came out because Republicans, members of Nixon's own party, called for investigations into the president's behavior.
I welcome this kind of examination because people...
I mean, that's what's been happening with Trump. It's been mostly Republicans coming out and speaking against him and making accusations against him. So I think that's... and of course, Trump turns around and says, "Oh, well, they're just rhinos, Republican in name only." In my opinion, it has not looked very good for Trump because of the fact that there's been so many Republicans that have come out against him.
People have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
What did the president know? And when did he know it?
In the House Judiciary Committee, Republicans joined with Democrats to approve articles of impeachment against Nixon.
The public began to kind of render a judgment against Nixon, which was his popularity plummeted.
But Nixon resigned before the full House could vote on impeachment.
I must put the interests of America first. I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Republican leaders had told him there's no way he'd survive the vote, which helps explain why no president has ever been removed from office by impeachment. for that to happen, the president doesn't just have to commit some high crime or misdemeanor. He has to lose the support of his own party, in which case, history suggests he'll see himself out.
Well, it hasn't hurt Trump so far. There are, I mean, if you look at the January 6th investigations, it was led primarily by Republicans, not Democrats. At the witness testimony, everyone who officially went out, took an oath and made accusations against Trump, they were primarily Republicans. In terms of like his reelection in 2024, I mean, there's a whole Wikipedia page. Let's pull it up here. There's a Wikipedia page. Oop. Here we go. There's a Wikipedia page of every Republican opposing Donald Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. So, I would say that currently the Republican Party, which a lot of people have left the Republican Party because of Trump, but I would say it's about 25% never Trumpers that are still identify as Republicans, maybe as high as 30%. And then the rest, mostly at least 65%, probably more like 70% of Republicans that support Trump. And then even within that group, the 70%, you could say maybe within that group, majority of them probably would support him no matter what. Even if he murdered a baby, like went up and like chopped the baby's head off or something, they would still support Trump. Like even though it was live on cameras around the world, because there's that level of dedication to him. It is very cult-like. It is essentially a cult. There's nothing he could do. Anything that is negative about him, they automatically just explain it away as some kind of conspiracy against him. And the more that he's attacked, the more they love him. So it's one of those things where, people can be manipulated. I've been manipulated many times throughout my life. Fortunately, the older I get, the more I'm aware of how I'm manipulated. And I try to spread the word, say, hey, you can be manipulated too, or that you don't, it's not your fault. We all fall for these things. But I think primarily the Republicans who have spoken out against Trump have been principled. It's not like a lot of them have actually lost their re-elections because of speaking out against Trump. So they didn't really have a whole lot to gain, although a lot of them did get some, extra appearances or money for speeches or to write a book. So you can't discount that as well, because a lot of people who have spoken out against Trump that are Republicans have financially gained from speaking out against him. But yeah, it's, the reason why I think Trump has actually faced these 91 charges, criminal charges, is because so many Republicans, most of these Republicans are not in public office. They are within government, federal organizations. So, as some would call, the deep state. Anyway, so yeah, back to Joe Biden. Will he be impeached? I think I would say at this point, there is probably a 50% chance, 50-50 chance that he gets impeached, but we'll have to see what the Judiciary Committee comes up with. If they can come up with some pretty solid evidence, then maybe that will change. If they come up with nothing, then I might lower that, because, there are Republicans that may decide, it's not worth it. My district is competitive. I might be turning away voters and hurting my reelection chances if I vote for impeachment of Biden. So, and that all said, though, it's still, we can't forget that Biden is historically unpopular. He's just as unpopular as Trump. So that's another thing that I think a lot of people don't bring up enough, is that, sure, a lot of people don't like Trump, but they also don't like Biden. So we can't really be too surprised when we see Biden, a lot of people not passionately defending him, the more indifference, I think. And if when it comes down to it, if indeed it stands that it's Trump versus Biden 2.0 in 2024, which pains me to say that, if that actually does still happen, it's just going to be the same result as 2020. There's going to be so many people that vote against Trump, not for Biden. And it's going to come down to turnout, and it's going to be just a lesser of two evils in the extreme. Just a really sad state of political affairs when it comes to presidential elections, really, because so many people are just, I guess, just scared of Trump, but also they're not really, Biden doesn't have that grassroots support that Trump does, but Trump's support is so small that a general election, the odds are stacked against him. He still has a chance to win, though, which is another crazy thing. He has a chance with the Electoral College. He always has a chance to win. And especially if you look at head-to-head polling between Trump and Biden, I think, a lot of times there's polls where Trump is polls ahead of Biden. So how would a no labels candidate impact the race? Well, I think if you're not familiar with no labels, it's like a third party movement that tries to be centrist, but I think kind of leans more towards the right. Honestly, I think it would probably hurt Trump more than it would hurt Biden. But it's hard to say. I'm not really a big fan of the whole spoiler idea. I made a whole video again, I called it a myth, the spoiler myth, specifically referring to Ralph Nader. But there's good arguments for it, so I can't discount all that stuff. But I think a lot of people most people aren't like us. They're not really into politics. And so they don't really have these principled ideologies, or they really don't have strong opinions about most issues, and especially when it comes to policies. And so, you get people voting for two different candidates that seem to have nothing in common, but they like them both. They vote for them both. That happens more often than we admit, I think. Indeed. Yeah, the Forward Party is still the thing about the Forward Party is they mostly endorse Democrats. They've endorsed, I think, some Republicans, but they are what you call a fusion party. So they're not so much about we're only going to support Forward Party people, because there have been very few candidates who identify as Forward Party. But what they often do is they form coalitions with both Democrats and Republicans, mostly Democrats. Yeah, I saw Andrew Yang in person when I was in Iowa. And speaking of which, I'm going back to Iowa for the Republican caucus here this winter. It's just a short drive for me. So we will be heading up to Iowa, trying to see some of these candidates in person. Of course, not for the Democratic side, but for the Republican side. It's the very first one for the Republicans. And there's at least, I would say, 5 or 6 candidates challenging Trump that at least have a chance to get the nomination instead of him. Although at this point, I think Trump is heavily favored, and it just doesn't seem like he's going to lose that momentum no matter what. That's a good question. I think I just don't see him losing the nomination. But yeah, I do think that he would be the type of person like Theodore Roosevelt in 1912. He's like, well, if I'm not the nominee, then I'm just going to do whatever I can to take down the Republican nominee. And he would run knowing that he would take away votes from the Republican Party. But again, that's like the spoiler effect that I say, well, it's not so simple. But yeah, the thing is, you can only vote for one. We don't have star voting or ranked choice voting. So with the current system, plurality voting is, unfortunately, you only get to choose one. So yeah, I get it. Yeah, the whole party does seem to revolve around Trump. That's true. Shout out to Alaska and Maine. They have ranked choice voting. We got a Canadian here who's like, basically it's plurality voting, which you only get to choose one, winner takes all. So, but it's for presidential elections, we have the Electoral College, which means the each state has just a few electors that represent the votes of everyone in the entire state. And so depending on how the state does overall, although this doesn't technically have to be true because these electors could actually vote against how the majority of their state voted, technically speaking, in a lot of the states, but they're supposed to vote with their state. So like say here in Kansas, we got about 3 million people. We've got about 2 million eligible voters, maybe 1.7 million eligible voters. Say the majority of them vote for Trump, then all 6 electoral votes go to Trump no matter what. 2 states divide up their electoral votes, Maine and Nebraska, but otherwise, yeah, it's winner takes all. And so it's a system that's often not very democratic, actually. That's the very oversimplified explanation. I have several videos actually about the Electoral College, but I'm very biased against it. So just to forewarn you, rural states benefit and small states like Kansas benefit. Nepotism is everywhere, and corruption. Don't deny it. All right, so I think I want to wrap things up here. Good to see a little bit bigger crowd here today. A reminder, if you have any videos that you want me to react to for a stream, preferably American history or geography or economics, please send them my way on social media, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, or just email them to me at imrbeat@gmail.com. And I do strongly consider a lot of the ones you send me. Teapot Dome scandal and the Get It Kids. But anyway, so I do this every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Central. Hey, happy birthday. Happy birthday, the Cool Banana 69. All right. Well, thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Take care.